Well, I saw some of that. Are you like me too? And folks, in the first week, couple of weeks, maybe even month of the election, protect your health, protect your health, protect your mental health. And I say that all to say, as I respond to Fadi, is are you like me when you see a headline that might say stuff that you disagree with or you don't want to hear? I'm just skipping over. I might see the headline, but I'm not. I don't have what it takes right now to dive into some of these analysis saying, you know, Joe Biden was going to lose 400. I think it was 400 electoral votes was what some of them are saying, right? I just do not have. Other than seeing that, I don't have the energy to go deep into it. Now I say that to say it goes back to what I said before about the media. If the media does its job objectively, fairly, responsibly, without an agenda, Joe Biden stays in the race and Joe Biden wins the race. If the media does their job the right way. But then also, you and I both realize if the media does this job fairly, responsibly, in a even-handed way, we literally are basically in the middle of Hillary Clinton's lame duck session, and it's Tim Kaine's chance to shine, or whoever on the bench would have stepped up. I believe that. Now that being said, I could see where Biden was doing worse and everything else. But I guess, and this is where Democrats are a little bit different than Republicans, and maybe we need to be a little bit more Republicans. I love Bill Clinton's, it's better, the Republicans will be strong and wrong than weak and right. There's, I don't want that. We've got to get away from strong and wrong versus weak and right. Can't there be a strong and right type thing? And I say that all to say about when it comes to Joe Biden and when it comes to, you know, Harris, when it comes to Harris. Put it this way, and this goes back to what we said before. If Biden is a stronger candidate and he ultimately decides that he's not going to run, and he hands it to Harris, she's a stronger candidate. So I mean that's something that we probably have to give further thought too. Is that you know, but I also think though that again, Harris was probably for any number of reasons the best person to replace Biden. I don't think Gavin Newsom or anyone else would have preferred any better, and Gavin's the one that had he done it, you would have. Do you really think that the black women? Do you really think the women in general that just got geeked, that just went over the top for Harris? Do you really think that they would, be as hyped? But one of the things that I'd love to know, and it's happened, and it fits in with the undervote. But I also don't know. Maybe a political scientist can tell us more. Donald Trump won in 2024 with fewer votes than he lost with in 2020. And so while as everybody's doing their autopsies and their analysis, the fact that Trump won with less was not a bunch of Americans moving in his direction. Am I right? It was maybe Americans just, and remember what we said. If you look at how Harris may still have performed poorly with black men, but the black men who voted still gave her strong black numbers. We could have maybe had more black men voting. So that being said, and I'm not looking for a silver lining, but I am looking for honest discussions, honest narratives, honest frames. What should we make of the fact that fewer people voted? Yeah, Harris lost, and that's a loss is a loss, a win is a win. But if you're trying to create narratives and talk about things, what do we make of the fact that fewer people voted for Trump in 2024 than 2020? Regardless of winning or loss, that's something I think people have to pay attention to as well. Meaning there wasn't a lot of people who heard his message and said I'm going to go out and vote. There were fewer people who heard his message and said I'm going to go out and vote. So Harris obviously saw a lot of drop off from what Biden did, but Trump saw a drop off from what Trump did. So we've been focusing a lot on us, but what do you make of the drop off for Trump?
I think that Joe Biden was maybe the most underestimated politician ever. Right? He's gotten the most votes ever out of anyone that's ever existed. His legacy, granted, his policy legacy will we'll talk about it, but Trump's going to erase a lot of that. But his legacy will be he's the only one who ever defeated Trump. And I like that for him. The underdog who takes away the big bad bully. I like that for Joe Biden. But the reason I bring that up is because 2020 was, I think a lot of people expected it to be less. I think the George Floyd civil unrest, the pandemic. Also, John, let's not underestimate I was about to say Palestine, Pennsylvania, um, Georgia. Certain states made it harder to vote by mail than 2020 because of the COVID pandemic. So some of it was just it was inconvenient for people. I believe again, not enough to swing an election, just to be very clear. But I believe people showed up and saw a 3 hour line and said, "Whatever, I'm going home." And I don't honestly blame them. But again, that's state legislators, usually Republican, who want to voter suppress, right? So I don't know what it is, but I think some of it's just logistical that it was harder to vote in 2024 than it was 2020. And I think a lot of people just checked out. I also think similar to 2016, I think he looked like he was losing, and a lot of people were like, it's fine. But I want to talk, you talked about you're not ready to dive in, and I totally get it. And this is actually a good segment to me because this is what I'm growing to believe. This is what I'm feeling in my gut is, again, there's a lot of talk online. It's too early. We're never going to run a woman again. We're never going to run a person of color again. Andy Bashir. I want people to stay away from Andy Bashir for 4 years and let him do what he wants to do, right? But here's, I think, the lesson the Democrats should take from this is none of it mattered. And here's what I mean by that. I think she would have lost if Shapiro was on the ballot, or if it was Walz, or if it was Kelly, or if it was Warnock. I think Biden would have lost if he was at the top of the ticket. I think if Jesus Christ himself was on the top of the ticket, we would have lost. I think Democrats can run. Sorry, I'm all over the place, John, because I have a lot to say. But Trump made the Democrats the establishment. She's on stage dancing with Beyonce. That was the quote, right? He made it so that everyone was against him, and that was the vibe. Beyonce was against him. Taylor Swift was against him. Democrats were against him. The Justice Department was against him. The newspapers are against him. Now, some of that's just BS, right? But he successfully painted the Democrats were the establishment. They're the ones in power saying, I'm the reason for your problems. They're campaigning in Texas with Beyonce and I'm at McDonald's. He was able to run a campaign that was full of zero substance, but vibes. And that's what the lesson I want Democrats to take. John, remember for 4 years we said Twitter isn't real life? I think this is the election that changed that. I think social media is real life for a lot of people. And it doesn't matter that we could say inflation is under 3%. It doesn't matter we could say that Trump killed the border bill. A lot of this is just vibes. And I'm thinking of Bernie Sanders a lot, John. I know you're going to hate this. Do I think Bernie Sanders would have won? No. I think Bernie Sanders got his ass kicked in 2 straight elections. But there's something I think about his voter base. And the fact that a lot of his voter base were radical leftists that churned into MAGA cultists tells me that there's something there. There's something to Bernie's appeal. Again, do I think he should have ran? Am I a fan of him? No. Like I generally speaking, I'm not a fan of what he pulled off in 2016. But he was vibes, John. He would say, let's get free college. And people were like, how are you going to pay for this? It didn't matter. He was saying, let's do this and let's fix the climate. He never introduced a bill in Congress to fix the climate. It was just vibes, right? And I think Democrats could do better without, now part of it's the media, right? They forced her to put together a 1,000,000-page plan that didn't matter. And I still respect the Kamala ignored the mainstream media. I still respect it because it didn't swing this election. Joe Rogan didn't swing this election. None of this swung the election. I think Democrats could stop focusing on policy in the mud of it. You want to talk about $15 minimum wage? Cool. Stop explaining how you're going to pay for things. Stop explaining things in long speeches. I think we need bullet point campaigning, and I think that's what Trump's very good at, and that's why he won this race, John. He was able to communicate effectively, um, and Democrats are able to communicate better. It's not even the wrong message. It's just too complicated of a message in the sense that it's not sexy enough. John, I know that's very discerning. I know that's very disheartening because we should be a country that is able to read and able to talk about things in an in-depth manner, but that's not where the country's at right now. The last thing I want to say is you talked about the media, you talked about state supreme courts and all this stuff. Democrats have to grapple with maybe the country's not as left as we think. John, for years and years, we kept saying as voters came in, as when I say came in, I mean as they got into voter age, 18 years old, 19 years old, um, as immigrants came in here and earned the right to citizenship and voted, we just assumed that all of them were going to be left leaning because of how the country is. And frankly, there's Gen Z is a lot more conservative than I think we all realized. I was completely floored to see the numbers of Arab Americans and Asian Americans and Latino Americans um, swinging right. And I think we have to grapple with the country's not as left wing and it's more centered and maybe right centered than we want to believe. Now, that doesn't mean we abandon trans people or abandon immigrants or abandon all these people. It doesn't mean that. It means the opposite. I just think we have to communicate why that matters. And I don't believe Democrats dog down to people. I don't. I know you've seen that online, John. Like, oh, they talk down to us. No. When we tell you stop being an asshole, that's not talking down to you. That's actually checking you and where you should be checked. But can we communicate why it's important to care about trans issues without saying without being in the room where it happened? If that to make a Hamilton reference, can we do that at the front of the stage and say this is why this matters, without getting into much what is a woman and those are all traps, right? Let's just talk about humanity and empathy, and this is why it matters. And I think Democrats would be better doing that moving forward.
Well, let me you you said a lot that it's so funny that I think we're all working through things in the same issues. In many cases, we all are even arriving at some of the same conclusions. We're maybe coming up with different methods, right? Different approaches. And the first thing I was going to say is you said something earlier which might contradict the thought that we're not as far left as I first of all, I agree with you that people don't feel as far left as we feel, but I think that's more of a function of not knowing what left or right truly is. And what do I mean by that? You said that, and I saw the same thing about the whole thing that like when you remove names, that Harris's policies and the policies of the Democrats, which are left policies, are very popular, right? So it becomes sort of a branding thing, and it becomes like a demonization thing. Now, I was thinking a lot about this, like especially with the whole issue of trans stuff, and also you and I both know we both feel that racism and misogyny played a big role in Harris's loss, right? The what I realize is that whether it's race, whether it's gender, whether it's the issue of trans, maybe the fact that those discussions, for the most part, are being held in the political space in which it's very easy to demonize. It's very easy to simplify and everything. Um, most people. I teach at Columbia College. You went to Columbia College. Most people are not going to deal with the trans issue in a personal level. They're going to just see stuff on the news or what have you. I'm not sure if there was a significant trans population or acceptance of trans when you were undergrad at Columbia, but right now we have a decent trans population. I have to be very mindful of students' pronouns. And so one of the reasons why it's so easy for me to embrace is because I'm in a world in which this is a reality. This is just not some random person I'm reading about, winning a swim meet. This is a kid that sits in front of me, in class. And it's a priority for me to make sure. I'll tell you this last semester, I screwed the pooch and got a pronoun wrong. And I will tell you, I felt like shit for a while, right? And that's just how it is. So what I'm saying is that a lot of the issues, racism, sexism, issues of gender, issues LGBTQ, those most people are having those discussions only in a politically polarized environment. They're not having it in a human environment. And realistically, for Democrats and everyone to take, to go forward, it, until we have more discussions of those issues outside of politics, might they always be politically volatile issues and easy to and realistically and so now to your point about like how do we handle it then, especially in democratic politics, meaning that it's always got to be a priority. It's always got to be something we work on and work for, but it's probably it can never not be a priority, but where does it fit in the priority scale? Now, I will tell you, I don't think that Democrats made a priority, but because Democrats are not vilifying on the issue, it's easy for Republicans to make it like it's one of our priorities.